Love your neighbor and buy local. That's my argument here on the David Tula Show, where we explore and advocate for and lobby for local economy and the free market, lococentrism, nugacentrism, thinking, as it were, that we are at the center of the universe, and that what matters here is important, that what matters in Manhattan or Washington or Brussels matters really less. And if we want to have an influence for good, for progress, that we need to work here, starting in our own neighborhoods and in our own places of employment and our own businesses and among people whom, by God's providence, we have come into connection with. David Tula is here, and there's an event tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at Barking Legs Theater, and I have broadcast journalist Marie Mott here on the phone to tell us what's going on in regards to Unjolee Moore, who was convicted of 2 killings. Marie, what is the problem with his conviction, and what's happening tomorrow and Monday?
First, thank you, David, for allowing me to come on the show today and talk about Unjolee's case. The problem that we have with Unjolee is that he's been wrongfully convicted of a crime that he did not commit. And the case, unfortunately, involves police corruption, official misconduct, perjury, tampering of evidence, as well as witness tampering, which should be able to exonerate Mr. Moore from the wrongful conviction. And the importance of this is that the family does deserve justice. We do not want the family to go without justice. They deserve justice. You
mean the families of the victims?
Justice does not look like convicting a man who's not guilty of the crime.
Right. We're talking about justice for the victims, the survivors of the dead men.
That is correct.
All right. So what's happening? Go on. Say more.
Okay. So if you look at the particulars of Mr. Moore's case, we have now retired police officer Edwin McPherson, who was not originally supposed to be in the investigation of the murders, but because his niece was involved, she called him before, during, and after the murders. His niece was involved in the murder case. So he decided to take it upon himself to butt into the case, to order that certain evidence not be collected that would prove Mr. Moore's innocence, as well as lying under oath and committing perjury during the case. So this his conduct was brought to our attention by the Chattanooga Police Department Internal Affairs Unit, which actually has information that is public, stating that Captain McPherson interfered in a very illegal way that should exonerate Mr. Moore. And this case also entails an officer by the name of Michael Wenger, who has been involved in 2 prior police brutality cases here in the city of Chattanooga. Michael Wenger was involved in the beating of Chris Tate, as well as Adam Tatum, prior to Mr. Moore coming into contact with him. Mr. Moore states that Officer Wenger tortured him and coerced a confession out of him.
What's happening tomorrow, Marie Mott?
So tomorrow at Barking Legs Theater, we will have a community event that we are calling Resist and Chill. Resist and Chill at Barking Legs at 1307 Dodge Avenue, starting at 1 p.m. The purposes behind this event, which is a collaborative of concerned citizens for justice and a group called The Hangout, is to get the community familiar with the case and to build resistance and to light a fire in the community to be involved in this case. Because this coming Monday, Mr. Moore will be pleading to Judge Poole's office, or Judge Poole's room at 600 Market Street on Monday at 8 a.m. To receive a new trial so he can have the opportunity to exonerate himself. And Mr. Moore has been incarcerated for a crime that he did not commit, currently now almost 9 years.
So the event you're mentioning in court, in Judge Don Poole's court is you're asking people to be there early. Court starts at 9. And I spoke with the assistant of Judge Poole this morning, and she said, well, we don't open the court until 15 till. So this sounds like your hope is to get people together just to kind of meet each other outside in the foyer, outside the criminal court in the Justice Building downtown, and maybe hear words about why you all are there to watch this proceeding. And so will there be an attorney, Marie, who will be filing this motion or making some kind of initial argument? Is it a petition for post-conviction relief? Is it what exactly is the form of his side? What is his side going to be saying or arguing? Do you know?
So this is a post-conviction hearing. So he already submitted an initial appeal. So this is his opportunity. He does have lawyers who now are going to be representing him. So the goal of the post-conviction hearing is to petition for a new trial. During Mr. Moore's original trial, there was suppression of evidence, witness tampering, and so many things that happened. Evidence that was not called, witnesses that were not called to the stand that could testify that Mr. Moore was not only not there, he did not have any DNA evidence that linked him to the case. He petitioned his public defender to request his cell phone records that would give GPS location that would prove he was not there. Those were never brought up. And so he did not have a fair trial. So he is petitioning for a fair trial where all of the evidence can be presented. And
that's going to be Monday morning. Court opens at 9 o'clock. That's Judge Don Poole's criminal court here in Hamilton County. And you're telling us, Marie Mott, that the kind of fundraising get-together and discussion about this case where people can meet each other and find out more about what is perceived to be a grave injustice is 1 p.m. at the Barking Legs Theater, and that is 1307 Dodds Avenue. And Marie, will you be there?
I certainly will be there. I'm actually going to be emceeing the event myself, so I'm grateful for Concerned Citizens for Justice and the Hangout Collaborative allowing me to MC the event. And I want to petition. This is not just for a particular segment of the community. It's not just for African Americans. I want to even petition Christians, my white brothers and sisters, people of all kinds. It doesn't matter who you are. Dr. Martin Luther King surmised that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice absolutely everywhere. And it is in our benefit to join together no matter what God we believe in, no matter who we serve, no matter what color we are, what our socioeconomic status is. When the liberties of an individual are threatened, then you can best believe that it shall and it can happen to you. And so my petition is to the listener to join in this effort. If you would like to reach out, you can link with Concerned Citizens for Justice on Facebook and social media, as well as myself, and I will assist you. But please come and show solidarity. This is a community effort. It's not about color. This is about standing on the side of justice and what is right.
Marie Mott, press correspondent and broadcast journalist, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Make sure you tune into Marie's show at 11 o'clock Monday here on 92.7 Nougat Radio. And this is David Toulis. Thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time this afternoon. I hope your Friday is going well. Friday's a wonderful day for me. I spend most of my morning at the Panera Bread store in Hickson getting my show together, thinking about future programs and reading. And today I had my law books piled around me as I was thinking about the execution of Billy Ray Irick and justice. Justice is a key interest in Christianity. Christianity holds that justice is the main argument for God, by God, into humankind. You must be just. And so if you look at the commandments, the 10 commandments, which summarize all the case law that affect the individual and that affect the kingdom, right? A kingdom, the society, all are about just thoughts, just acts, just private acts, just public acts, just courts, just wars, just defense. And so think about the seventh commandment prohibiting adultery. To have adulterous thoughts, you're attacking God, you're offending God because you have unjust thoughts about another woman, you're coveting another woman other than your wife, or if you're a bachelor, never married, you're coveting a woman you can't have, you're not allowed to have. And so these are unjust. And so God commands, his main ethic is justice. Justice is the main claim from God into humankind, according to the teachings of the scriptures, as I have read them. And we're short on justice in many areas, and partly because we don't care about justice. We think that somehow courts and the operation of judges and sheriffs and officials are in a neutral area. We can't make reform. Reform is really impossible. And so while I call for reform, and as a member of the press, want things to be done quickly, right? I realize that it's not really in the hands of people who have just information, but their change of heart, their change of mind has to be affected by God himself. And of course, that's through the Holy Spirit working over time through the word faithfully preached. Is the word faithfully preached? Well, it seems maybe not in most cases, at least here in this country, where the Christianity, the quality of Christianity is so low that there are people in Africa who are concerned, and in fact are sending missionaries to this country. And in fact, the Camp House coffee house and the church connected with it has its origins in the concern of black people in Africa about the state of Christianity, the lostness of Christianity in this country, and its ill effect. It seems to have no more effect on what happens in the public square, that these people are very concerned about it. And I'm looking at a story that was carried on one of the TV station's websites this morning about a man in Virginia, 19-year-old. He tied up a 14-year-old girl, and then he assaulted her after a school play. And according to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the judge, T.J. Haller, sentenced this man, Logan Osborne, to 10 years in prison with 8 years suspended. But just this last week, he stayed the execution of a 2-year active term, noting that guidelines apparently call for no prison time. He pleaded guilty to carnal knowledge, that is to say, having sexual relations with a girl, and in making that plea, the prosecutors didn't have to prove that there was forcible sodomy. He didn't have to deal with forcible sodomy, so he has no prison time. And in defense of the girl, when you're 14, you can't give consent. And even though that was the argument of the perpetrator. David Toulis, what's on your mind?
I'm going to throw a little curveball at you, David. Did Christ ever support the death penalty? And I'm not talking about Old Testament stuff, because, Christians don't care about the Old Testament. It's all old stuff. But did Christ ever promote the death penalty? And didn't he say, he was not sin, let them cast the first stone? But before you answer that, I'm surprised you're not talking about this high-speed chase that happened where a police officer lost his leg. I mean, what crime did this guy commit, or allegedly commit, to the point that elevated to where a police officer lost his leg? I mean, one day he's going to look down at his leg and go, was losing my leg worth chasing this guy because he was wanted for what? I still don't know what this guy was wanted for.
Well, have you read the story about that? Can you fill me in? That's a story I did not look at.
Last week, the station covered the news on it, where I believe it was a Chattanooga police officer or somebody.
No, it was North Georgia.
County, one of his departments. They lost their leg, police officer, in a high-speed chase.
Well, I think, thanks, Mike. The high-speed chase is something that just shouldn't happen. If officers know the car and have the direction, it's easy to find where that person has gone. No one can elude the law for too long in this country. We have so much law, we have so many cameras, and we have so many pieces of public property, cars namely, that it's really difficult to elude detection indefinitely. So the people who are running from the officer need to be assured that they will be caught at some point at the convenience of the officer without endangering the public. Now, the question about whether Christ upheld capital punishment is a great one, and I'm glad Mike mentioned that encounter with the woman caught in the act of adultery. That passage is often used to say that Christ overturned all law, that Christ overturned all the civil law that is codified, that was codified in the first covenant. The first covenant, which of course has a kind of public commonwealth perspective. The New Testament has a much more personal framework and interest. The Old Testament law establishes countries, it establishes kingdoms, and makes the law for those. The New Testament is about the individual, how the individual can't escape God's claims upon him, even in his most private thoughts. And private action, the personal life of a believer, is what is supported and much is taught to edify the believer in the New Testament. But the Old Testament is where you have your public policy. Did Christ overturn capital punishment? And the answer is no. In that encounter with the Pharisees, he wrote something in the sand, and I'm not sure, it's not known what it was for sure, but some theologians, as I'm recalling now, have speculated that it may have been the reference to the witness, any witness who testifies of a crime cannot have done the same crime. And the problem here was adultery. And the Pharisees were not just hypocrites. They were, all of them, they were adulterers and thieves and disregarding their parents. And the Lord has a litany of accusations against them, which are public sins as well as private sin. Adultery is it is a crime. Adultery is a crime and a public sin because it is a public act against another family, one family against another family. It's a public act. It's not a private activity. And the Lord said, he said, he who is free of this sin is what he was saying. He's not saying free from sin. He wasn't overturning all the law. He was just saying he who is free of this particular sin of adultery may make the accusation. But of course, now any one of those lecherous men of God, if you will, who did that would be open to like accusation against himself, which means that they would face potentially capital punishment as well. It's not that the Lord Jesus vacated the rule on capital punishment for adultery. He didn't, but he effectively forbade any of the accusers from coming forth. And the woman, as you recall, I think she's on the ground, is asked, "Where are your accusers?" And she looks up and sees that they have all left. They've all skulked away because he has reminded them of the law about the clean hands doctrine. You cannot be guilty of the crime of which you accuse another, lest you be accused yourself. And if inquiry is made. So he's not overturning the law of capital punishment at all, not at all. Now, I wanted to mention another story that I didn't get to. It was in the news may have been Friday. It may have been Monday. So it's not something that's new, but I just want to mention this to you to hearten you, my listener. And it's a story about Jeff Hobby, the former sheriff of Worth County, Georgia. He's the man who ordered a search without probable cause of an entire high school. And as you recall, he had students lined up on the wall with their hands up. And at the time when it happened, I was saying, where are the men among these students? Is there not one student who would say, "You, officer, get your hands out from under that girl's shorts. Why do you have your hands in her privates? Why do you have your hands in her backside? Why do you have your hands on her breast? You stop right now." Not one young man, according to report. Well, there's no report of a young man having done this, is what I'm saying. Not one young man, I'm going to say as a generalization, argued that, "No, you do not have this authority to search me, and you do not have authority to put your hands on this girl next to me." And yet that's what happened in April 2017. Girls had their privates groped, boys on this event. A mass search. Mass searches are not allowed. In fact, it's a crime. It's a crime to have a mass search. And former Sheriff Jeff Hobby has 6 months in jail. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. He has 5 years of probation as well. No drugs were found, right? That's the ostensible cause. He had heard rumors that there may be some contraband in that school. And yet, look, a thorough search of these American students, groped all of them without probable cause on any of them. Probable cause has to be particular. There's no such thing as a general search. General searches are forbidden. They are simply forbidden. The DA's office prosecuted on false violation of oath of office. There are 3 counts of that. And Paul Bowden is the DA. He says the district attorney's office recognizes the toll the actions of Hobby and his subsequent prosecution have taken on all those involved. However, it is incumbent for our judicial system to hold all persons, including law enforcement, to the same standard. The DA's office is hopeful the resolution of this case will allow the victims, the Worth County Sheriff's Department, and the community to begin the much-needed healing process. And in a civil case, $3 million are being distributed among these 600 students, up to $4,000 per victim. David Toulis, Nougat Radio.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Detectives in Bradley County say they tried to pull over a minivan on APD 40 because the driver was wanted for a series of burglaries in town. Deputies say instead of pulling over, he tried to speed off, even pulling into oncoming traffic. He lost control and crashed into a ditch. Johnny and Stephanie Jenkins were both arrested. Mr. Jenkins confessed he had taken both meth and hydrocodone. Last year, a CARTA driver suffered burns when an assailant threw an unknown